Hi, this is the Philosophical Angle program, and I am your host, Chris Angle. The purpose of the Philosophical Angle is to examine the nature and concepts in current media. I'm the author of 5 books on philosophy known as the Detmar-Haskell Dialogues, and they are the nature of aesthetics, the nature of ethics, the nature of truth, the philosophical equations of economics, and the nature of the political left and right. If you'd like to make comment on what you hear in this program, give us a shout at detmar.haskell, and Haskell spelled with 2 L's. So that's detmar.haskell at icloud.com. So this week's episode is going to be entitled, Why Would the Progressive Left Want to Kill Charlie Kirk? So as everybody knows, Charlie Kirk was assassinated, and it appears he was assassinated by somebody of the left. Why is there a general relationship between the left and assassinations throughout history? If we take a look at recent mass killings or individual assassinations, it appears that they're done almost entirely by the political left or someone who is inundated by psychotropic drugs. It's amazing. And this killing, not being a mass killing, was also centered upon one person of the right. It appeared to be a political assassination. But why? And why Charlie Kirk? Well, let's ask the philosophical angle. First, let's agree that the political left looks to control society's citizens. You may notice that the more governments control their citizens, the more they are of the left. Thus, extreme examples of the left are North Korea, China, Cuba. Former examples of the extreme left are Pol Pot's Cambodia, Mao's China, and all the kings and queens throughout history. Now, let me explain. There are 7 dictums that control and motivate the left and the right. The first 2 are the same for both the left and right, but then they diverge. So let's go over them and see how it fits with the assassination. Principle number 1 is the same for both, as I just mentioned, the left and the right, and it is that all life does that which is good for it. Pretty much a biological and economic truism. Number 2, men have the will to dominate. Perhaps I should say males. This was the first generated from St. Augustine's theory of libido dominandi, and this is well known in biological anthropology that males and many of the higher animal species tend to dominate. Number 3, the left looks at somebody else and thinks that they are inherently bad. And in this case, that fits perfectly with Charlie because they know that he was bad, because his ideas, arguments, and his skill in debate were so potent and cogent that the left had difficulty in assimilating them. Conversely, when a person of the right looks at somebody else, they look at them as having some good, and so they try to seek out that goodness in order to be able to cooperate with that person. So this principle is applicable because the left will look outside of their group at somebody like Charlie and know that that person is bad and something should be done about it. Principle number 4. This is the theory of noblesse oblige. And it's from the early 1800s. And it probably came about from the Congress of Vienna or soon thereafter in 1815, and then subsequently became to be believed by the aristocracy of Europe that the noble elite class should provide a base living for the have-nots, probably because they learned from the French Revolution they didn't want their heads to be cut off anymore. The aristocracy is, of course, the class of the haves, coming from the kings and queens and nobles throughout history. These are the haves of society, and they've always looked down on the have-nots. The have-nots of society throughout history work to control the have-nots of societies. They've done this throughout history. We all see how the kings and queens look down on the have-nots because they don't have royal blood. But they can't implement control by themselves, so they employ others to assist. And they want to control society for their own personal profit, as per principle number 1, that all life does that which is good for it. So the more they can control the have-nots, the better it is for their own sakes. So throughout history, they've tried to control the have-nots. Now, of course, the kings and queens can't do all of the controlling by themselves. So they always have a group of nobles to assist, and the nobles need help also as society grows. So they have their administrators, functionaries, and other such operatives that can effectuate control of society. And we're going to term the whole group as the aristocracy. So throughout history, the kings and queens could control society until the American and French revolutions occurred. After these revolutions, democracy, Republican democracy, came on the scene. And these haves had to start convincing the have-nots to vote for them. This changed everything. 2 or more political parties emerged, depending on which country. One political party or more will concentrate on controlling society and bringing forth policies that will effectuate greater control. And the second set of parties, either in the United States or Europe or elsewhere, are centered upon effectuating freedom in society. Therefore, the parties that try to effectuate control have evolved from the left, who evolved from the kings and queens and the aristocracy of Europe and elsewhere throughout the world. The have-nots, on the other hand, produce political parties whose objective is to bring society, to bring a freedom to society. So it becomes a battle of ideas to convince the people to vote for their party by either voting for more control or more freedom. So in the case of the United States, the party that brings more control and regulations and laws that could end up controlling more and more of the U.S. social and economic society comes from the Democrats, and particularly from the far-left progressive Democrats. And the party that tries to bring freedom are the conservatives, such as the conservative Republicans and the libertarians. So as far as we can estimate, those who prefer control are about 30% of the population. And those who prefer freedom are about 30% of the population. And no matter how much you try to convince anybody of those groups, they will always vote for the political candidates that try to effectuate those respective policies. So in elections, the parties try to convince the center, that is the undecided, to vote for one side or the other. That is, to vote for somebody who supports freedom or one who supports more regulations and control of society. The farther left you go in all the societies throughout the world, the more control appears, such as in the farthest to the left, for example, North Korea, with the totalitarian control of its populace, which is the farthest left that can be seen on the face of the earth. There are other degrees of the left, such as Communist China. They have a little bit less control, but a lot of control nevertheless, and it's obviously considered a leftist country. But why Charlie Kirk? The answer is that he was a gadfly to the left. His quick-witted, highly intelligent, fast-moving answers could not be debated by the left. So the left became frustrated, and the society of the haves brought forth one individual who decided to take it upon himself to rid this gadfly of the conservative right, to make life more bearable for the progressive left. And ergo, once accomplished, the ebullient, happy reaction to those of the left were astonishing and amazing, and quite a surprise to those of the right. But once you understand all the dictums that describe how the left thinks, then it becomes understandable. But still, the question remains, why was he assassinated? Why is it necessary to kill him? What leads the leftists to violence, and extreme violence at that? And that is answered by dictum 5. This principle is from the famous Lord Acton statement, which is that power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, but still the question remains, absolute power? Certainly this boy did not have absolute power, such as the king and queen. So far, we understand that the assassin knows that Charlie is inherently bad as per dictum 3. He also knows that the contract between the have and the have-nots, that is, between the totalitarian progressive left and their subjects, the proletariats, the serfs, the have-not slaves, has been interpreted and corrupted by the conservative right. The conservative right is threatening to interrupt this noblesse oblige contract by interfering and interrupting the flow of welfare to the have-not and interrupting the rights of those have-nots, particularly these small individual partisan groups such as the trans people, the pro-abortionists, and other minorities. These have-not groups are being jeopardized by the conservative policies of laissez-faire thinkers perpetrated by the Trump regime, and obviously the Trump thought fascists, such as Charlie Kirk. Now, in addition to this, knowing that inherently Charlie Kirk and his MAGA followers are inherently bad, and in addition to knowing that they are all interrupting the all-important contract between the have and the have-nots, once this is being interrupted, this brings us to the point where the assassin knows that he is all-powerful. He knows he has a gun. He knows he can assassinate Charlie Kirk. That it'll be very easy. He is in total control. And this total control corrupts his mind as predicted in dictum 5, which is that the Lord Acton principle, that power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So it happens when the mind becomes corrupted. So what happens? What happens is that only the priorities of oneself is considered important. And as such, one's thoughts are the ones that become important for the entire world. That is to say, that when one becomes so absorbed in oneself, only his own priorities matter. and he realizes that the priorities of others are of no consequence. There are no consequences because he knows that he doesn't have to cooperate with anybody anymore. And when he does want to cooperate with anybody anymore, when he doesn't want to cooperate, then he has no respect for them and he becomes unethical. Corruption of the mind provides a platform by which someone may become totally immoral or unethical in their actions. This is because the nature of ethics is the appropriate dispensation of respect. And when you have no respect for others, when you understand that you don't have to cooperate with other individuals anymore, and when you don't cooperate with them to produce anything such as goods and services, then you don't have any respect for them. And when you don't have any respect for them, you don't have any ethics, because respect is the instrument that biology or evolution provides that allows us to cooperate to produce goods and services, which brings us up away from misery. And so ethics leaves somebody. So when ethics disappears within you, then all that remains is the end justifies the means. And when the end justifies the means is your only modus operandi, then you can become a killer and may assassinate others without remorse, because you have no ethics. You are devoid of ethics and can do anything to achieve your objectives. You become like Stalin, like Mao, like Pol Pot, or any other totalitarian whose mind was corrupted by their total control of society. So even a singular person taking on that belief and thought process of the haves, who are in total control, that person also becomes just like the totalitarian. And only the end justifies the means is the only matter that is important. So if you have any thoughts and replies, give us a shout at The Philosophical Angle. And the email, detmar.haskell@icloud.com. Thank you.